"You're hurrying to the wrong station," the woman heard the fortune teller say, and the moment she spotted her smirking mother-in-law by the left luggage lockers, she decided to follow. The pies she had just bought at the pastry shop were still warm and filled the air with the dizzying aroma of fresh baked goods. Palomita couldn't resist. She took one out of the paper bag and ate it with pleasure. Suddenly she met the unblinking gaze of large, sorrowful eyes. Palomita choked. A boy of about two and a half was staring at her. He was sitting right on the grass under a tree. Beside him, legs crossed beneath a long, full skirt, sat a young woman. Judging by the looks, she was the child's mother. Palomita was struck by the hopelessness frozen in the eyes of the young Romani woman and her little boy. For some reason she felt sorry for them. Palomita walked over and, smiling, held out to the boy the 2 pies left in the bag. "Eat," she said with a gentle smile. "They're tasty." Then she looked at the mother, who was no more than 19 or 20. "Are you all right?" But the young Romani woman didn't even glance at her. She was lost in thought. Palomita watched the child devour the pies with delight and moved on. She had gone about 7 meters when a loud, commanding voice rang out behind her. "Don't go. Come back." Curious, the woman turned and walked back to the mother and child. "You're kind, a good person, but you're living a lie," the Romani woman said, piercing Palomita with the prickly stare of her unblinking black eyes. "It's time you learned the truth. Are you going to the station?" "Yes," Palomita replied in surprise. "My friend's arriving in a couple of hours. I'm going to meet her train." She hadn't finished when the Romani woman raised her hand in an imperious gesture, silencing her. "You're hurrying to the wrong station. You will meet your friend in 2 hours," she said firmly. "But first you need to go to another station, the South Station. Go there right now, hurry, and then you'll learn a terrible secret. It will upset you, but you don't deserve to be deceived for the rest of your life. Go to the South Station at once." Palomita was at a loss. She had never dealt with Romani people and had always thought it best to give them a wide berth. You never know what to expect. As if reading her thoughts, the Romani woman smirked and said, "First go and see, then draw your conclusions. But remember, if you want to learn the truth, don't approach anyone and don't ask anything. Today you'll see only a small part of the secret. Today you'll merely brush against it, and the worst and most unpleasant part you'll learn only if you muster some patience. Hurry, and thank you for the pies." Palomita didn't recognize herself. She, a successful, self-confident 40-year-old woman with no superstitions whatsoever, suddenly wavered. Should she believe the Romani woman or not? Was she telling the truth or making things up? But the young fortune teller hadn't even mentioned money. That meant she spoke to her not for profit, but for some other reason. Perhaps it was her way of thanking Palomita for the pies. Nothing sensible came to mind. To put an end to her doubts, Palomita decided to go to the South Station. There was plenty of time before her friend's train arrived to get there, spend 20 or 30 minutes, and calmly return. She hurried to the South Station. Only when she was approaching it did she realize she hadn't asked the Romani woman what or whom she should pay attention to. The South Station was huge. She could walk through it in half an hour, but would she manage to see the important thing the fortune teller had mentioned? And there was Palomita at the South Station already. She walked unhurriedly through the vast building, looking at people sitting on benches, passengers with huge suitcases rushing for their trains, a loud, laughing group of young women, and customers chewing in the cafes. She had covered more than half the immense building, but had seen nothing noteworthy. Ahead, several rows of automatic luggage lockers came into view. There were very few people around, and Palomita thought it was time to turn back. At the very last moment she saw her mother-in-law standing by a locker. It was so unexpected that Palomita's first impulse was to go up to the pensioner, say hello, and ask what she was doing there. But at that very moment she remembered how strictly the Romani woman had warned her not to speak to anyone. Trying to remain unseen, Palomita sat down next to a plump woman, hoping the latter's generous figure would hide her from her mother-in-law's eyes. Palomita began to watch the relative. Deep down she was sure the older woman was either meeting or seeing someone off. The longer she watched her, the clearer it became that the pensioner was pleased about something. Isabelita fairly glowed with happiness. She seemed younger and prettier. Palomita observed her with curiosity. Had she come for a date? She checked the time. In 15 minutes she would have to leave to meet her friend. And then came a real shock. Benjamin, Palomita's husband, walked up to his mother. This was unexpected, because Benjamin had left on a business trip 2 days earlier and wasn't due back until the day after tomorrow. That morning Palomita had spoken to him on video, and he hadn't breathed a word about returning early. Palomita felt a strong urge to go up to them and get to the bottom of it, but she again remembered the stern eyes of the Romani woman, who had warned that if she spoke to anyone, she would never learn the truth. She decided to be patient and kept watching her mother-in-law and husband. She noticed that Benjamin had brought a huge red suitcase, and her mother-in-law opened a locker that already contained some things. Benjamin put the suitcase inside as well, and the two of them, chatting cheerfully, headed for the exit. A couple of minutes later, Palomita hurried to the other station to meet her friend. Time was running short. Suddenly her phone rang. Palomita, she heard the delighted voice of her friend Catalina. "Our train will be at the station in 40 minutes. Are you meeting me?" "Of course, Catalina, don't worry. I'll be on time." Palomita had to take a taxi. She didn't want to be late. Catalina was coming from far away and was probably tired. It wouldn't do to make her wait. In less than an hour the friends met on the platform. They hadn't seen each other for 15 years. The reunion was warm, sincere, and exuberant. "Catalina." Palomita laughed softly as she hugged her friend. "Where's your size 44? I was sure you'd be slim your whole life, just like your mother." Catalina laughed merrily in reply. "My mother has only one daughter, but I've had 3 children. I put on 5 kilos after each pregnancy. And then there's age. I forgot about size 44 long ago, now I wear 56. All the better." Palomita's face lit up with a radiant smile. As the saying goes, there should be plenty of a good person. Laughing and chatting, the friends walked to the taxi stand, got a cab, loaded Catalina's small suitcase and travel bag into the trunk, and went to Palomita's place. She was so happy to see her friend that for a while she completely forgot about her husband, her mother-in-law, and the Romani woman. Palomita and Catalina had known each other since childhood. Catalina used to live in the same building as Palomita's family. The girls had been in the same class and friends since school. Later they graduated from different institutes, and at 23 Catalina got married. Her husband took her to his city. Palomita's heart had long been torn between 2 suitors. Benjamin was the same age as Palomita and had been courting her since their 2nd year at the institute. He was a good-natured, sociable guy studying to become a surgeon. The institute's professors considered him talented but extremely lazy and irresponsible. Palomita tended to agree, but unlike the professors, she cherished the hope that if a wise woman stood by Benjamin's side in life, she could steer him in the right direction. Then he would not only build a brilliant career in surgery but also take up scientific work. Palomita's second suitor since youth was Fernando. He was 3 years older than she was. Without a second thought, Palomita would have chosen him, if not for his profession. Fernando studied at a military academy and intended to follow in his father's footsteps. His father had been a career officer and was killed in a hot spot when Fernando turned 18. The young man wouldn't hear of any other profession. His father was his idol, a model of courage, and he couldn't betray his legacy. Palomita was afraid that if she tied her life to Fernando, she would have to wander with him from garrison to garrison for years. And if she were truly unlucky, she might be widowed early, like Fernando's mother. Those prospects frightened her, and gradually she began to drift away from Fernando and grow closer to Benjamin. When she turned 25, she married the surgeon. That was when she and Catalina saw each other for the last time. Her husband let her go to the wedding of her beloved friend. Palomita and Benjamin had no children, so over time Palomita threw herself into her business. She had 3 ateliers for women's clothing and home textiles. The shops were located in different parts of the city, so checking on each one took a lot of time. Demanding as she was, Palomita tried to do this every day. Palomita's business brought in a decent profit, so Benjamin didn't strain himself much. After graduating from medical school, he worked as a surgeon for only half a year. He quickly realized the enormous responsibility that rests on people in that profession and embarked on a creative search. After leaving medicine, Benjamin had already changed 12 jobs. He had worked at all sorts of things but never stayed anywhere long, and a serious career was out of the question. In the breaks between looking for yet another job, Benjamin always sank into a crisis and for long stretches didn't work at all. Palomita took it calmly. While her husband rested between old and new jobs, she immersed herself fully in the business, and he took on the cleaning of their cozy 3-room apartment, bought with Palomita's earnings, and did the cooking. Everyone was satisfied. Everyone except Isabelita, Benjamin's mother. She had a long list of grievances against Palomita. The mother-in-law didn't like that the couple had no children. She thought it was Palomita's fault, although the doctors confidently said that both she and Benjamin were healthy. The doctors merely shrugged, believing that pregnancy would occur sooner or later. But childlessness wasn't Isabelita's only complaint against her kind, compliant daughter-in-law. One day Isabelita's patience snapped, and she told Palomita to her face, "It's your fault Benjamin didn't become an outstanding surgeon. Do you remember how his professors praised him at the institute? He held such promise, and you trampled his talent. You should have constantly reminded him that he could become a luminary. You should have inspired him and done everything to keep him in surgery. But you did nothing when he decided to end his medical career. Your own business mattered more, and you didn't care about your husband." Palomita always took such outbursts from her mother-in-law calmly. She understood that Isabelita worried deeply about her son. And indeed, not only hadn't Benjamin become a great surgeon, he hadn't achieved anything in life at all, not even obtained a specialty that would allow him to earn a steady living. Once, Palomita tried to make him a manager and find him a job in her business. She put him in charge of one of her 3 ateliers and explained in detail what he should do. But after a month and a half, Benjamin asked to be relieved of the position. Working as his wife's deputy seemed difficult and thankless. Since then, Palomita stopped giving Benjamin any advice. He looked for new work on his own. His latest job involved business trips. He told Palomita he joined a travel company and was being sent to scout new routes for hiking tours that his employer ran in different parts of the country. The job was simple: walk the route, take photos, and provide a photo report to the employer. Benjamin was supposed to be on one of those trips now. When Palomita brought Catalina home, Benjamin wasn't there. Palomita was even glad they could talk one-on-one. "Palomita, I'm only here for a few hours," Catalina said regretfully. "I've got an 11 p.m. train south. I'm going to a sanatorium." "Well, at least we'll spend half a day together," Palomita said with a smile at her friend. "You haven't been calling much lately. We only talk in snatches, and I've missed you so much." "Palomita, I just don't have time for long conversations," the guest sighed. 3 kids, school and kindergarten, work, the house. Since I divorced my husband, everything's on me. Catalina, I never really understood why you and Arturo split up. He seemed like such a solid man and loved you." "He cheated on me," her friend replied, lowering her eyes. "Let's not talk about him. It's unpleasant to remember. Better tell me how things are with you and Benjamin." "Nothing's changed for us," Palomita smiled. "I grind away. My husband searches for himself, switching from one job to another. My mother-in-law blames me for all mortal sins. That's our life. But I'm used to it and don't complain about fate. We all live the life we deserve." Catalina was surprised by those last words. She had always believed her friend deserved happiness. Yet despite her blooming look, beautiful apartment, and successful business, Palomita didn't seem happy to Catalina. It was clear she was catastrophically short of love. "I don't understand why you need Benjamin," Catalina said with regret. "You're so beautiful and successful, you could have found yourself a normal, loving man long ago. You tied yourself to a slacker." "Catalina, I've thought about that a lot," Palomita admitted. "There was a time when I wanted to divorce him, and then I thought, who would want me? What if I'm infertile after all?" And Benjamin didn't seem too upset that we don't have children. So I decided not to divorce. And I don't stress about money. What I earn is plenty to live on. And my husband has always earned pennies and kept it all for pocket money. Enough about me, better tell me about your children." Catalina smiled. "I left them with their grandmother. I'm going to get a little treatment. Palomita, you can't imagine what good kids I have. The oldest is 15, a straight-A student. He's into programming. He's already gone to competitions several times with his school. He's taken first place 3 times. The middle one is 11, also a smart boy, and my little girl is only 3. My precious princess." Catalina's eyes shone with happiness as she spoke about her children. Every word echoed painfully in Palomita's soul. She had been deprived of that happiness. "Catalina, you could at least show me some photos," the hostess asked. "Palomita, don't be offended," Catalina gave her a stern look. "I deliberately don't take photos. I'm afraid of the evil eye. People are envious and mean these days, and my kids are as if cut from the same mold, beautiful, cheerful, lively, smiling. I don't want to show them to strangers unnecessarily. I'd show you, but as I said, there are no photos." The friends sat at the table for a while and then chatted for a long time about everything under the sun. Catalina looked at her watch. "It's already 9 in the evening. My train is in 2 hours. We'll leave in half an hour." "I'm so sorry you could only drop by for half a day," said Palomita. "Maybe you can stop on your way back and stay a day or 2. "Palomita, I'd love to, but I'm afraid I can't. I need to get back to the kids as soon as possible. I miss them very much." Suddenly the phone rang. It was her mother-in-law. Palomita, came Isabelita's weak voice on the line. My heart had seized up. It's been hurting for half an hour. I'm getting worse and worse. I'm scared to be alone at home. Could you come over and sit with me for a bit? Yes, Isabelita, I'm coming. Wait for me. Palomita hung up. Catalina, I'm sorry, my mother-in-law's taken ill. She's had some heart issues lately. I'll drive you to the station now and then go to her. You won't mind? Not at all, I completely understand. Catalina jumped up and rushed to her things. Give her my regards. A couple of minutes later a taxi was taking the women to the station. They said a quick goodbye there, and Palomita headed to her mother-in-law's. Isabelita was pale. She was lying on the couch in the living room. Pills were on the side table, and the apartment was filled with the strong smell of heart drops. Only after arriving at her mother-in-law's did Palomita remember that earlier that day she had seen her with her husband at the South Station. She didn't ask anything, but after sitting by the sick woman's couch for a while, she went to the kitchen to put on the kettle. At the same time, she walked through all the rooms, checking whether Benjamin had left any traces of having been there. But no, everything in the apartment was as usual. She returned to her mother-in-law and sat down beside her again. Isabelita, Benjamin called me this morning. We talked a bit. He said he was fine and that he'd be back the day after tomorrow. I wish it were sooner, the mother-in-law said plaintively. I'm afraid I might not live to see it. Don't exaggerate, the daughter-in-law smiled. It's just a slight indisposition. It will pass in a moment. Let's go to the kitchen, have some tea, and I'll tell you about Catalina. By the way, she sends her regards. Well then tell me, the older woman brightened. How does she look? How is she doing? Catalina is true to herself, Palomita said with a touch of envy. She lives for her own pleasure. I think everything works out for her because she denies herself nothing. She's a preschool teacher and somehow manages to live on that money. She's dressed well enough, and she went to a sanatorium. She said her kids are wonderful. She's so happy with them that she doesn't even think about her husband. She handles everything on her own. I'm amazed she has the strength. And I keep wondering how she lives on one salary and child benefits. It's peanuts. Don't be offended, Isabelita suddenly said. But I've always liked Catalina more than you. Back when my son was in the institute and started dating you, I told him to pay attention to your friend. But Benjamin kept saying he loved you and needed no one else. Turns out I wasn't wrong. Catalina's doing well, and she's happy. Yes, Palomita agreed. Judging by everything, she is happy. I think if she wanted to get married, she'd easily find herself a man. She's so warm, homely, cheerful, she could charm anyone. Half an hour later, Isabelita had fully recovered, and Palomita got ready to leave. I can still make it to the station, Catalina, and I didn't really say a proper goodbye. I was hurrying to you. What are you saying, Palomita? The mother-in-law protested. What if I feel bad again? You could at least stay with me for half an hour, and your Catalina is probably already sitting on the train. Palomita sighed but didn't argue. It was already midnight when she returned home by taxi. The moment her head touched the pillow, she fell asleep. It had been an unusual day, and she was very tired. The next morning Palomita planned to visit her ateliers. She hadn't shown up at any of them for 2 days and didn't want her staff to relax without her supervision. But she couldn't concentrate on work. After seeing Catalina off, she quickly forgot about her friend. There were plenty of other concerns. Yet the gypsy woman with her obscure and frightening prophecy would not leave her mind. Palomita suddenly began to doubt that the secret the gypsy spoke of was connected to her mother-in-law and her husband, whom she had seen by the left luggage lockers at the South Station. What if the fortune teller had meant something entirely different? Maybe Palomita had focused on the wrong thing. Only the gypsy herself could dispel these doubts. So Palomita decided to go, at the first opportunity, to the place where they had first met. Perhaps the young woman with the child went there often. But today the fortune teller wasn't there, and early the next morning Benjamin, Palomita's husband, returned home. She didn't say a word about having seen him with Isabelita at the station. How was the trip? She asked calmly, taking a modest bouquet from her husband. Nothing special, just a routine trip, Benjamin replied, relaxed. And why are you so serious? Any problems? I have no problems, she answered sternly and enigmatically, looking intently into his eyes. Palomita could hardly believe her husband was keeping some serious secret from her. She felt she knew everything about him, even what he didn't know about himself. But the fact that Benjamin had stubbornly concealed the day of his return from the business trip made her nervous. She wanted to understand as soon as possible what was going on, why her husband and mother-in-law hadn't simply told her he was back early. Or maybe he hadn't traveled at all. They could have told her that honestly, Palamita saw nothing terrible in it. Every day on her way to work she stopped by the place where she'd met the fortune teller, but she saw her only on the fourth day. The gypsy recognized her at once and gave a slight smile. "So, you still can't figure out what's happening?" the seer asked. "Don't rush things. You'll learn everything when you're ready for changes in your life. Then it won't hurt. It will happen quickly, within a month, so you won't have to wait long. Don't hurry. Focus on your business. It seems you wanted to open another atelier near your home. Now is the time to do it. In a month, all that's hidden will become clear. Just be patient." Palamita looked closely at the gypsy. "Answer me one question. Do I understand correctly that this secret is connected with my husband?" The gypsy gave a barely noticeable nod. "Is he cheating on me?" Palamita asked. "If only it were just that," the gypsy sighed. "It's much more serious. But don't rush and don't question him. Just wait." Palamita understood that she would find no peace until she knew the whole truth. She tried not to show her husband that something was bothering her and was even relieved when, over dinner, Benjamin announced that he was leaving on a business trip the next day. "It hasn't even been a week since you got back from the last trip. Don't you have anyone else to send?" she asked in surprise. "It's fine," Benjamin assured her. "As long as there's work, I need to earn money. By the way, can you spot me a little? I wanted to buy something light. They're sending me south, maybe some shorts, a hat." "But you have power of attorney for my bank account," his wife reminded him. "Withdraw whatever you need." "You're a darling," he said, getting up from the table and pecking her on the cheek. "Thanks for dinner. I'll go pack my suitcase. I'm leaving early tomorrow." Lately Palamita had noticed herself watching and listening to her husband more closely. It seemed to her that at dinner he behaved unnaturally, smiling too much at the wrong moments, unusually courteous and kind. Troubling suspicions gnawed at her, but she couldn't tell exactly what was bothering her. Then a great idea came to her. Tomorrow, when he wasn't home, she would dig through his laptop. Maybe she'd find something interesting, and if not, she would try to speak carefully with her mother-in-law. Perhaps the latter would accidentally let something slip. Benjamin left on a 2-week business trip, the first time he'd been away so long. Palamita decided not to waste time. She didn't go to work. She sat down at her husband's laptop and, within 10 minutes, came upon a folder ominously titled "If Something Happens to Me." Judging by the date, it had been created 14 years ago. She opened it at once. Inside were several links to cloud storage and several copies of letters, more like notes of 1 or 2 sentences. The first note read, "Weakling, leave my wife alone, or else." The next, written a couple of years later, "You were on your knees swearing it was over. Just try to show up in my family's life again." And the last, a little over 3 years ago, "Don't think you can build happiness on deception and lies. You've won this round, I'm leaving, but your troubles are only beginning. You'll see how it ends." After reading all this, Palamita understood only one thing. For many years there had been some woman in her husband's life, and a married one at that. The woman's husband had tried in vain to save his family but had apparently split up with his wife, which meant that now that woman and Benjamin could have a happy relationship. It didn't fit in her head. Palamita tried to access her husband's cloud storage, but she couldn't get in. And surely that was where the answers to all her questions lay. There was nothing left for Palamita but to follow the gypsy's advice and focus on opening her 4th atelier. The necessary documents were ready, and the next morning she went to City Hall to resolve the lease for a space in a municipal building. She was walking down a long corridor when she heard behind her, "Palamita." She turned and saw a handsome, athletic man with a thick, half-gray head of hair looking at her with delight. There was something painfully familiar about him, but she couldn't place him. He came right up to her. "Palamita, don't you recognize me? I'd recognize you in any crowd and any disguise. You've become so beautiful." She recognized him by the enthusiastic gleam in his eyes. Only one person had ever looked at her like that, Fernando. But it had been so long that she had nearly forgotten her devoted admirer, who had quietly stepped aside 15 years ago when she told him she loved Benjamin and was going to marry him. "Fernando," Palamita exclaimed in amazement. "I would never have recognized you. You've changed, matured, gone gray. You look solid." Fernando laughed cheerfully. "Oh, come on, say it straight. I've gotten older and less handsome, but for a man that's no big deal. What are you doing here?" "I have business," she replied. "In 7 minutes the head of the leasing department is supposed to see me. There's a cafe downstairs. Let's meet in half an hour and chat. I need to go now." Before long, Palamita was free. She was granted permission to lease the requested premises and given a date to sign the contract. She headed to the cafe. She was happy to see Fernando. Next to him, she always felt like a little cherished girl for whom someone was ready to do anything. Her husband Benjamin had never given her that feeling. As soon as she went down to the cafe, she saw Fernando. He was sitting at a table waiting for her. "So, did you get everything sorted?" he asked, helping her settle into her seat. "If you need help, let me know. I know a lot of people here. Now, tell me, how's life? How's the family?" Palomita could see how genuinely glad Fernando was to see her, how lovingly he looked at her, and her heart melted. No one had looked at her with such love and admiration for a long time. She briefly told him about her husband, his failed career as a surgeon, his endless search for himself, her own successful business. She felt as if she were telling it all cheerfully and briskly, trying to convey that everything was fine, that she was happy and satisfied with her lot. But judging by how Fernando's smile faded and how sad his eyes became, he clearly understood that there was much she wasn't saying. He wasn't about to pry, and when she finished, he told her how he had lived after they parted. "I never did get married," Fernando suddenly admitted. "At first I just couldn't forget you, and then came one deployment after another to hot spots. I was wounded several times, shuttled between hospitals. There was no time for a family. After a serious wound 2 years ago, I left the service. Now I work as head of the regional division of the emergency service." "Fernando, why don't you come over to my place tonight?" Palomita suggested unexpectedly. "I'm alone right now. My husband's on a business trip. You can see our apartment. We'll sit and chat like at home." They agreed to meet and parted, each going about their business. That evening Palomita set a beautiful table. For the main course she made her signature cutlets. She remembered well that Fernando had loved them in their youth. He was punctual and arrived exactly on time with a huge bouquet of scarlet roses. "Palomita, I look at you and it's as if 15 years never passed. You're just as young and beautiful," he couldn't help complimenting her. Palomita felt a bit out of her element. It was clear to her that Fernando's love hadn't gone anywhere. It seemed he had loved only her all his life. It was touching and unusual, and she didn't know how to react. Fernando still felt tenderly toward her and didn't hide it, even though he knew perfectly well that she was married and wasn't planning to change anything in her life. Palomita admitted to herself that Fernando's presence made her heart flutter. It had pounded wildly when they met in the city hall corridor and she recognized him. And so it was now, as she welcomed him into her home. She pulled herself together. "I wanted to show you the apartment. Come on." She led him out onto the huge balcony, where there was a small table and 2 chairs, and sat down in one of them. "When I'm in a bad mood or I'm tired, I always come out here and look at the city. It gets easier. I sit a bit, and my strength returns, my mood lifts. I always thought the main source of a good mood and a surge of strength in a family should be the people at home, husband and children," Fernando said sadly, looking at her. "For me, Benjamin is both husband and child," Palomita replied with a smile. "He himself constantly needs support and help, so I can't really count on him." Fernando had already realized there were no children in the family, but didn't dare ask why. It became completely obvious to him that Palomita didn't feel supported by her husband, and that was sad. Then Palomita showed him the rooms and flipped through an album of her collection of women's dresses, with which she had taken first place at the latest city competition. When they approached the set table, she asked with a smile, "Do you still love my cutlets? I made them for the main course. I'll bring them now." She went to the kitchen, and he was pleasantly surprised. She remembered such a little thing. Their evening together stretched long past midnight. They talked and couldn't seem to talk enough or look their fill at each other. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Fernando said she needed at least a little rest before the new workday, said goodbye, and went home. He left, and she still couldn't fall asleep for a long time. It felt so good to be with Fernando. She tried to remember when she and Benjamin had last spoken as warmly and candidly as she and Fernando had that evening, and couldn't. The conclusion was discouraging. With her husband, Palomita communicated on a completely different wavelength. Their exchanges were more about daily chores, business, and finances than about feelings and romance. Fernando called in the middle of the next workday and suggested they have lunch together, promising to come to any place convenient for her. She was at one of her ateliers and suggested the little restaurant next door. Fernando arrived exactly half an hour later and presented her with a small, beautiful bouquet. When they sat down, Palomita decided to put all the cards on the table. Looking him in the eye, she said firmly, "Fernando, let's agree on this right away. I'm married and I'm not going to cheat on my husband. I don't want to mess with your head. If you're looking for romance, you'd better find another woman. You and I are just friends, understand?" She was sure Fernando would agree at once, but he looked at her with a half-smile. Palomita, you stated your position honestly, so I'll be completely honest with you. You may be married, but there isn't a man by your side. You can tell even by the way you talk to me. You're used to deciding everything yourself, not because you're so smart and independent, but only because there's no man next to you who should be making the most important decisions in life. Palomita was taken aback. There was a lot of truth in Fernando's words, and he went on. Once, 15 years ago, I already made the mistake of believing you when you said you loved Benjamin. I can clearly see he hasn't made you happy. You don't need a man like Benjamin. And what kind, then? Palomita smiled sadly. One like you? And how are you any different from each other? If you're trying to hurt me, Fernando said calmly, it won't work. I never take offense at those I love. Benjamin and I have nothing in common. For a loving man, his woman is a goddess. He worships her and does everything so that she is immersed in love and happiness. You're nothing like such a woman. That means he doesn't love you. Does that really suit you? Palomita was silent. A month ago she would have argued with Fernando, but after meeting the gypsy and finding those strange threats on her husband's laptop, she was no longer sure of Benjamin's love or fidelity. She was ashamed to admit it, but she felt Fernando was right, and he decided to finish his short speech. That's why, Palomita, he said, looking at her tenderly, I'm warning you, I will fight for your love. If Benjamin proves to you that he loves you and you decide to stay with him, I will disappear from your life forever. But if I understand that you'll be better with me than with him, I'll do everything for you. I want you to know what it means to be a loved woman. Fernando's words moved Palomita. She understood that he was saying the right things. Neither her husband Benjamin nor his mother had ever given her much warmth. They were generous with remarks and demands, but not with gratitude and love. And all these years Palomita had tried to be needed, had always come to their aid, had never counted the money she spent on them, yet she still hadn't become truly close and beloved. Seeing her mood sour, Fernando hurried to reassure her. That's it, Palomita, hard talk's over. Truth isn't always pleasant. Forget it. Life itself will set everything straight. I'm sure it will happen fairly soon. Just trust me. Tell me how your premises are coming along. By the end of lunch, Palomita's spirits had noticeably improved. She caught herself thinking she didn't want to part from Fernando. With him everything felt calm and easy. She just wanted to sit beside him, listen to him, and look into his loving eyes. A couple of days later, on an errand in the city center, Palomita happened to see the familiar gypsy woman with the little boy on a bench in a small square. She was delighted and went right over. The young gypsy was again sitting under a tree, again with a distant look, lost in her own thoughts, and apparently troubled. Hello, Palomita said with a smile, stopping beside her. I'm so glad I ran into you. I wanted to ask you something. The gypsy lifted eyes full of sorrow to her, and Palomita fell silent. She realized the young fortune-teller was going through a bad time. It seems you have some problem, Palomita asked hesitantly. Maybe I can help you. Tell me what happened. The young seer's expression changed. She looked at Palomita warmly. You're the first who wanted to help me, but no one can help me. I'll tell you my misfortune. The young woman smiled sadly. My husband died recently. He was young, handsome, and brave. We loved each other. And now the Baron has decided to marry me off to a widower. He's almost 60. That wouldn't be the worst of it, but he's a bad man, cruel and jealous. I know my son and I will be unhappy with him, but I can't refuse. Our laws don't allow us to go against the will of our elder. Palomita realized she had no idea how she could help, so she simply expressed sympathy. I'm sorry things are so bleak for you, but if you do need help, call me. She handed the gypsy her business card. You helped me, and I want to help you with something too. The fortune-teller silently tucked the card into one of the many pockets of her voluminous skirt and looked at Palomita with curiosity. And I see your life is beginning to change little by little. That's good. It's time you learned what happiness is. What do you mean? Palomita asked. But the gypsy only laughed. 2 more weeks, and you'll know everything. Be patient just a little longer, and visit your mother-in-law more often. Best of all after 8 in the evening. Then you'll not only learn, you'll see everything with your own eyes. With that, the gypsy turned away, and Palomita realized she would say no more. She said a warm goodbye and went about her business. Another week passed, during which Palomita met Fernando twice. They walked in the park on Sunday and dined at a restaurant midweek. She was afraid of these meetings. After each one, she felt more and more overwhelmed by her old feelings for him. Benjamin sent short messages almost every day saying he missed her and would be home soon. Her mother-in-law didn't call at all. Palomita phoned her a couple of times to ask if she needed help, but both times Isabelita was curt and ended the conversation quickly. Palomita knew that her mother-in-law disliked unannounced visitors, but that evening she decided to drop by Isabelita's. She remembered the gypsy's words that during one of these visits she might learn something important. Picking up her mother-in-law's favorite cake from a pastry shop, around 8 o'clock she rang Isabelita's bell. Isabelita was flustered to see her on the doorstep but invited her in. "What are you doing visiting so late?" she asked irritably. "I was just about to go to bed." "I've just been feeling uneasy, Isabelita," Palomita said kindly. "You usually call me every other day, and now a whole week of silence. I thought maybe you were under the weather and didn't want to bother me. I wanted to make sure you were all right, so I came by after work." "Well, since you're here, let's have some tea," the mother-in-law said, not hiding her annoyance. Suddenly Palomita's phone vibrated. It was a message from the bank. "Today's $100,000 limit has been reached. If you urgently need an amount that exceeds the limit, please contact the bank." Palomita was stunned. She hadn't used the bank account for many days. Her card balance was enough. She quickly opened her mobile banking app and saw that Benjamin had withdrawn $100,000 from her account that day using his power of attorney. But that wasn't all. She saw that every day while he'd been on his trip, he had been withdrawing money, different sums, from $10,000 to $27,000 a day. But why would he need that kind of crazy money on a business trip? She immediately revoked the power of attorney. Now Benjamin wouldn't be able to withdraw another cent, though he already had more than enough. Let him first explain why he needed the money. Isabelita noticed how her daughter-in-law had darkened. She pushed a cup of tea toward her, placed a slice of cake on a plate, and looked at her anxiously. "Palomita, what happened? What did you read? Was it something from Benjamin?" "It wasn't from Benjamin, but it is about him," Palomita said, looking at the older woman's worried face. She decided not to hide the truth from her mother-in-law, absolutely sure that on financial matters Isabelita would be on her side. The woman was frugal to the point of stinginess and always told Benjamin and Palomita they wasted too much money. "Can you imagine, Isabelita?" Palomita said, struggling to contain her outrage. "Benjamin withdrew $100,000 today. Do you have any idea what he needed such a sum for?" But the mother-in-law neither showed surprise nor indignation. She looked at Palomita calmly. "You surprise me, Palomita. You know Benjamin isn't a spendthrift. If he withdrew it, he needed it. Maybe he picked up some bug and is getting treated at a private clinic. Or maybe he decided to give you a royal present." "A royal present, with my own money," Palomita couldn't help a bitter irony. "He might at least have consulted me. I had only $500,000 in there, and in 3 days the fabrics and notions from abroad arrive. I'll have to pay $400,000, and it's gone. What do you suggest I do?" The mother-in-law bustled about. She seemed to feel a pang of shame for her son, or guilt for having raised someone who enjoyed living at others' expense. She looked conciliatory and said gently, "All right, why don't you step out onto the balcony for some fresh air? It's nice and cool now. I'll fetch a bottle of wine and warm up the stew. We'll have a little drink, calm down, and talk things over peacefully, figure out what to do about Benjamin." Palomita felt she didn't want to see anyone and gladly stepped out onto the balcony, sitting in Isabelita's favorite chair. 10 minutes later she heard the older woman calling her. Reluctantly she stood and walked slowly toward the kitchen. Passing the bedroom, she noticed a new framed photo on the nightstand by the bed. Curious, she picked it up and froze. In the photo were her Benjamin and her friend Catalina. Without thinking, Palomita walked into the kitchen and thrust the picture under her mother-in-law's nose. "Isabelita, explain this." Her voice and hands trembled with indignation. The older woman snatched the frame from her and said peevishly, "Why are you always poking your nose where it doesn't belong? You bring trouble on yourself. Yes, it's Benjamin and your friend Catalina. She went to a resort. Turns out they sent Benjamin there on a trip too. So they met. He told me right away but asked me not to tell you, otherwise you'd get all sorts of ideas." Isabelita gazed at Palomita with the most honest look she could muster. And from that kindly, honest look, Palomita understood she was being lied to. She sat down, poured herself some wine, drank it in one gulp, and asked, "Do they have a thing going?" The older woman fussed, pushing plates of food toward her guest. "How should I know what went on? When they left, there was nothing. Maybe something started when they met there. You know how it is on vacation." "You're mistaken, Isabelita," Palomita said, wounded. "You know perfectly well I hardly ever take vacations. I'm always at work. Benjamin, it seems, denies himself nothing." At that, Palomita decided it was the perfect moment to ask about the South Station, where she had seen Isabelita with Benjamin. "So tell me, Isabelita," she began acidly, "why did you hide from me that Benjamin was in town when I met with Catalina? And what were you two doing at the South Station by the lockers?" She was so outraged by what she'd learned that she completely forgot the young gypsy's instruction not to rush things and not to question anyone. She looked at her mother-in-law with indignation, but the woman suddenly went pale, clutched her heart, and sank heavily onto a chair. "Pill," the pensioner rasped. Palomita was truly frightened. "Isabelita, I'll bring your pill right now. As for Benjamin and Catalina, I don't care. We'll sort it out later. The main thing is that you get through this. I think Benjamin will explain everything, and we'll live as before." Those last words were balm to Isabelita's heart. The pill worked quickly, and soon the two women were chatting quietly at the table. Once Palomita was sure her mother-in-law had fully calmed down, she went home. It was already night, but she couldn't sleep. She sat on her balcony thinking that her life would never be the same. She would never forgive Benjamin's betrayal. Her soul felt heavy and bleak. Suddenly the phone rang. It was Fernando. "Hi," he greeted her. "I was driving past your place and saw all the lights on. Can't sleep?" "I feel awful," Palomita said softly. "I found out Benjamin is cheating on me with my best friend. You might remember her, Catalina?" "Yes, I remember Catalina," Fernando said. "I'm coming up." When he arrived, he tried to console her. "Are you sure there's something between them? Maybe it's just rumors? Don't get upset before you know." And suddenly Palomita began to cry. She hadn't cried in a long time. Since getting married, she had always believed a strong woman had no right to tears, and she had always had to be strong. After all, someone had to solve all the family's problems. Tonight her self-control failed. She cried right there with her face buried in Fernando's shoulder. Through her sobs he caught her words. "I always tried to be a good wife. I did everything I was supposed to and asked nothing of Benjamin. Why is he doing this to me?" "Because he's a fool," Fernando said confidently. "A fool and an egotist. He sees and values no one but himself. I don't understand what he and Catalina could possibly have in common. They always seemed like different people to me." "I don't want to talk about them," Palomita said. "Tomorrow I'll start gathering the documents for a divorce." Fernando sat with the woman he loved all night, comforting her and explaining that divorce is not the end of life. Palomita was grateful that he did not touch at all on the subject of their future together that evening. Fernando understood perfectly that this wasn't the moment to talk about his feelings. First he had to wait until Palomita coped with the misfortune that had befallen her and finally calmed down. He knew it would take time, and he was ready to wait as long as his beloved needed to get through her husband's betrayal and her close friend's treachery. Toward morning, Palomita made coffee, they each had a cup, and the man went home. It was time to get ready for work. Palomita decided to take a bath and sleep. She was luxuriating in the warm water when she heard the phone shrilling in the other room. She wasn't expecting any important calls, so she didn't hurry. After soaking in the bath, she came out and saw her husband was calling insistently. While she'd been in the water, he had dialed her number 18 times. As she hesitated over whether to call Benjamin back, he rang again. "Palomita, why aren't you picking up?" She heard her husband's worried voice. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine," Palomita answered coldly. "Do you have any other questions?" "Palomita, I got a message that you revoked the bank power of attorney. Is that true?" "It's true," she replied just as coldly. "I hope you don't have any more questions for me." "What happened, dear?" Palomita laughed. "Benjamin, this is the first time in your life you've called me dear. What's that about?" "Palomita, I'm not joking," her husband said sharply. "Explain to me why." But she didn't let him finish. "If I'm not mistaken, you're back in 2 days. By then I'll be ready to tell you everything. Until then, figure it out yourself." Palomita hung up and blocked both her husband's and Catalina's numbers. She had no intention of dealing with them. These people simply ceased to exist for her, as if they had never been part of her life. Before her husband returned, Palomita was determined to meet with the young gypsy. She regretted not having taken her number, but hoped to run into her somewhere they had met before. And so it happened. The gypsy and the boy were sitting under a tree on a small alley in the city center. Palomita already knew that was where she usually waited for anyone who wanted a reading. The fortune teller even said she had regular clients, though Palomita had never seen them, yet she didn't doubt the woman's prophetic gift in the least. Seeing the gypsy, Palomita approached. The young fortune teller smiled at her old acquaintance. "I see," the gypsy said, "you've almost calmed down." "Yes," the woman confirmed. "Now I know everything, But I still have one question. Will Fernando treat me the same way Benjamin did? Maybe I should stay alone? The gypsy smiled. Fernando is your fate. You made a mistake when you chose between two men and didn't listen to your heart. Even then it told you that you loved Fernando. Don't doubt him. Palomita breathed a sigh of relief, but the gypsy's face darkened and she suddenly said, You're mistaken if you think you already know your husband's secret. You don't yet know the most important thing. You'll learn it tomorrow. He'll arrive in the morning, and in the afternoon go visit your mother-in-law. You must go, even if your husband tries to stop you. Palomita was stunned. She had been sure she now knew everything about Benjamin. What other secret could the gypsy mean? Did he have not one but 2 or 3 mistresses? But Palomita didn't care. Her husband no longer existed for her, and she had no interest in his numerous lovers. She had no idea the matter might be something else entirely. In the morning she was getting ready to run errands when the doorbell rang. Benjamin had returned from his trip, handsome, tanned, and energetic. Have a good rest? She asked mockingly. Wonderful, Benjamin answered, then caught himself. I was lucky this trip was to the south. It was quite pleasant there. He hesitated, and Palomita realized he wanted to talk about something important. Palomita, this time I had to spend a lot of money, he began in a guilty tone. But his wife cut him off. Don't worry, she smirked. The bank gave me a loan so I can pay the suppliers, so everything's fine. She began putting on her shoes. You're going already? Benjamin asked. So early? Well, someone has to take care of business. She looked at him with sarcastic sweetness. I've got a lot to do today. See you. She sidestepped him as he moved to kiss her and left the apartment. Palomita had a busy day ahead. In the morning she planned to stop by a law firm that handled divorce cases. She didn't want to split her apartment and business with an idle, unfaithful husband. He hadn't lifted a finger to create any of it, and he never really limited his spending. After nearly 3 hours with the lawyer, Palomita stopped by her atelier and then headed to her mother-in-law's, whom the gypsy had strongly urged her to visit. When her mother-in-law opened the door, Palomita thought the woman was about to faint. Isabelita looked utterly stricken. Never in her life had the daughter-in-law seen her so pitiful and confused. Palomita, I won't let you in, Isabelita said, spreading her arms wide to block the entry as Palomita stood in the hall. I'm ill, go away. But from the other room came loud, cheerful children's laughter. The surprised guest went around her mother-in-law and walked into the living room. In an armchair sat a very pleased with herself Catalina. On either side of her sat a boy of about 11 and a girl of about 3, and opposite them stood a teenager recording video. Stunned, Palomita practically collapsed into a chair. Seeing the children, she understood why Catalina had never shown her photos of her sons and daughter. Both boys were the spitting image of Benjamin. Only the daughter looked like Catalina, the sons looked like their father. Hi, Palomita said, recovering a little and looking at the older boy. I just decided to drop in on Isabelita. Maybe you can show me some photos from the south? The teenager, who looked 15 or 16, nodded and handed her a tablet with photos and videos. While the flustered Catalina tried to think what to do next, Palomita scrolled through the tablet. It quickly became clear that Benjamin hadn't gone on a business trip at all. He'd been vacationing with his beloved woman and their children. There were photos and videos from the beach, cafes, shops, and parks. When she finished looking, Palomita sent the children to another room. Only she, Catalina, and Isabelita remained in the living room. Surprisingly, Palomita was completely calm. She couldn't understand why her husband had hidden his relationship with Catalina for so long. That's what she asked the two women. Her friend sat there flustered and guilty, silent. But the mother-in-law spoke up, firm and insistent. It was impossible not to cry, seeing how Catalina suffered because Benjamin chose you for his wife and not her. That's why she came to your wedding alone, without her husband. She decided to try her luck and take him away from you. It didn't work, but she still managed to get pregnant by him then. Palomita was shocked. Her friend had come to their 3-day wedding trip and in that time managed to become pregnant by the groom. It was the height of nerve. And Isabelita went on. Their oldest son was 3 when Catalina's husband began to doubt the boy was his. He started sending Benjamin threatening letters, and then Benjamin wanted to see his little boy. Catalina came here with him and got pregnant the second time. You're all unbelievable, Palomita said with disgust. Don't be angry, Palomita, her mother-in-law said contritely. You lived all these years in peace, knowing nothing. But Benjamin and Catalina, do you know how much they had to go through? Her husband did a DNA test and found out both boys weren't his. He divorced her and didn't pay child support, so they were barely scraping by. And the daughter, whose is she? Palomita asked Catalina with a mocking smile. Benjamin's, the friend answered softly. Then explain this to me, Palomita demanded. Why didn't Benjamin divorce me and leave the family if you two are so in love and have 3 children? Yes. The mother-in-law glared at her. And on what money would they live? As long as Benjamin was with you, he had a legal right to half of everything in the house. So he did what he could. One son is practically raised already. He just turned 15. Palomita felt so revolted being around these people that she stood up silently and walked out. But she couldn't go home. Being near her husband would be even more disgusting than being near her mother-in-law and Catalina. She called Fernando. Can I come over? I'm on my way, Fernando answered, surprised and pleased. I'll be home in half an hour. Do you know the address? He explained where he lived now and sent her the address of his new apartment, which he had received when he became head of the Regional Emergency Service Unit. An hour later, Palomita was at his place. She vividly recounted everything she had heard from her mother-in-law and friend, how much the boys looked like her husband, and added through tears, Fernando, you have to understand, we will never have children. He comforted her as best he could, and she admitted she couldn't stay under the same roof as her husband and wanted to give him a week to move in with his mother. She asked Fernando to put her up for that time. No problem, Fernando said, delighted. Pick either of the 2 bedrooms, whichever you like, that's where you'll stay. That evening, mustering her courage, Palomita called Benjamin and told him he had exactly 7 days to pack all his things and move out. As if, we have equal rights to the apartment, Benjamin objected. Be grateful I don't want your ateliers. In that case, I won't call you again. You can talk to my lawyer, Palomita said. She'd been lucky with the lawyer. He was experienced and legally savvy. He requested statements from all of Palomita's accounts and discovered that Benjamin had regularly been withdrawing more than half the money from them using his wife's power of attorney. All family expenses had always been paid by Palomita, which was also confirmed by bank documents. A month later, the court dissolved the marriage. Benjamin waived any property claims, afraid that if anyone decided to count everything down to the cent, he'd end up owing his ex-wife. Palomita couldn't go back to the apartment where she'd been deceived for so long. She decided to sell it and moved in with Fernando. They lived together and planned to marry at New Year's. A month after moving in with her fiancé, Palomita found out she was pregnant. The couple's happiness knew no bounds. The same could not be said of Benjamin and Catalina. Without the money Palomita used to bring in, her ex-husband couldn't afford to support 3 children. Now the 40-year-old son was asking his mother for money. Almost all of Isabelita's pension went to supporting her beloved grandchildren, who lived with their parents in the pensioner's apartment. Only now did Catalina realize how useless and unfit for life Benjamin really was. She often wept from guilt before her friend and from the realization of the terrible mistake she had made, betraying her husband and tying her life to Benjamin.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.